All right.
Awesome.
Oh, welcome everyone to Smart Buildings, Utopia or Dystopia. My name is Jeff LaRock. We truly appreciate you taking the time to be with us here virtually. Today's event is being provided with the support of Illumini, a new member of the smart technology and data analytics world based here in Ottawa, Canada. And I'm moderating today's panel discussion. I happen to also work for Illumini as Director of Sales. In fact, the 9th of June, it's just realized it's my 3-month anniversary. So as you can imagine, I want things to go well for everyone today, including myself. Make it past today, I'll still be here tomorrow. So that's my goal, and it'll be working out well for all of us. Also helping me is Kieran, our marketing associate. He's going to be monitoring our chat space today, and I'm going to have Kieran drop in from time to time with some poll questions that you can all participate in. And we're also encouraging you, our guests, to pose questions during today's event. Kieran will keep an eye on your questions. We'll do our best to relay those to our panelists today. To ask a question, you can look for the question mark, a logo that's located in the chat feed, and that way your question for our panelists will go to Kieran directly. And together we'll address them later on as best we can. We also want to point out that because you took the time to pre-register, we're going to be sending you all a copy of the event today as a recorded audio video file that you can share with your colleagues. And that will be made available to you within 48 hours of the event. So no need to take notes, just sit back, relax, and get ready to take in some incredible knowledge from our two esteemed panelists today. So let's get to know a little bit about them. I want to start with Meredith Thatcher. Meredith is a certified facilities manager and IFMA, the International Facility Management Association fellow. She describes herself as a workplace strategist and change leader who helps companies create an agile workplace and workforce. Recently, Meredith founded a new company called Agile Work Evolutions, a services-enabled software company and full advisory practice. Meredith and her team design, build, and implement workplace programs that help organizations evolve, become more agile, and in doing so meets the needs of both the employer and the employee. Meredith is joining us today from her home in Ottawa, Canada, I believe. Welcome, Meredith, to the show.
Thanks, Jeff.
Also here today is Paul Doherty. He's also an IFMA fellow and president and CEO of the Digit Group. Paul has been published in Forbes magazine, appeared on Bloomberg TV, and CNBC labeled Paul as one of America's business titans. Paul is a registered architect and an internationally sought after thought leader, strategist, and integrator of process, technology, and business. As founder of the Digit Group, Paul and his team are currently involved in several smart city design builds around the world, cities. And when he is not designing smart cities, Paul himself is a consultant with several Fortune 500 companies. Paul joins us today from his home in Memphis, Tennessee. Welcome, Paul.
Thanks, Jeff.
And Paul and Meredith are both sought after speakers by international associations, educational institutions. We're really fortunate to have them with us here today. Kieran is going to be posting links to both Meredith and Paul's business sites so that you want to make sure you visit their pages after the event today. I only met Paul actually about a month ago when we connected to prepare for today's panel discussion, whereas Meredith and I, some of you in the room know, Meredith and I have known each other for quite a while since I started my career in the industry here in office interiors, and it's just amazing to have you both here and seeing some familiar names in attendance. I apologize that you all have to be muted, but we have so many people in attendance today that we're going to keep the communication coming from Meredith and Paul, but we'll be watching for your feedback on the chat room. I can assure you that the energy is going to be amazing. The passion, the insight that these two bring to today's session is going to be a really, really great opportunity for everyone. I also know that we all are suffering from a little Zoom fatigue and virtual meeting fatigue, so I want to keep things moving as quick as I can. And we also have some treats lined up for you before this is all over, so we do encourage you to stay with us right till the end. It'll be worth your while, promise me. I'll tell you about those special things very, very soon. So welcome to Smart Buildings, Utopia or Dystopia, and a special welcome to our panelists, Meredith and Paul. Kieran is going to be closing the registration window in about 2 minutes, so if you know of any of your colleagues that still haven't checked in, send them a Slack message, a text, whatever way you have of getting hold of them, because we want to make sure everyone's here to get started, but we are going to be moving ahead. So buckle up and welcome to the panel discussion. So about 50 years ago, it was actually Stanley Kubrick's movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. It came out and had an infamous AI character known as HAL 2000. I'm old enough to remember that, and I think I saw it when it first came out, but not sure. My memory's gone. So a more recent reference might be Westworld, where we've got an entire community built around AI and robotics, and characters so realistic that we're not even sure whether a character is real or not and what we're witnessing. But a consistent theme about AI and technology is the struggle between good and evil, which is why we've opted to call today's panel discussion "Smart Buildings: Utopia or Dystopia." So everyone in the virtual room I'm sure, are all feeling like this has been going on forever, but going outside, gathering together is now becoming truly a life or death decision for many people. And smart technology is something that can possibly help. But for many of us, smart technology is just a fancy way of spying and intruding into our right to privacy. So I want to start things off with Paul. Based on your work with smart cities, do you think technology and smart technology is going to have a positive impact on getting us back to work and back to our offices sooner? Or are these tools going to basically keep so much information about us that it might even cause these delays to extend and lockdowns to continue? Do you think the emphasis will be on using technology to help us get back to the office sooner, or maybe keeping us more isolated and apart? What's your take on where we're going to go with this going forward, Paul?
Well, actually, we're at a really interesting time where the people's idea of work was office-centric for so long. And now all of a sudden, the past 3 months or so, all around the world, people are now starting to reimagine, well, in certain cases, I'm actually being more efficient, more effective from home. And now all of a sudden, the technology is allowing us to expand out what that cultural instinct is of every company. I think that when we start to talk about things like opening up, I'm in a state that just about a month ago down here in Tennessee, and it's been very peculiar because the science and data seem to be trumped by perception, meaning that this idea of 2 meters to stand away from each other for social distancing, and here in the States we call it 6 feet. What happened to that 4 inches? It's actually bullcrap. All this stuff does not make sense in an interior situation, which is why facility managers and people that are involved with the interiors should really understand that perception is going to be, you must have social distancing, but it has nothing to do with the science and data. The way the science and data works for this particular brand of COVID is that for every 1,000 droplets, which is very, very low, it's an algorithm that talks about how much time you're spending with those 1,000 droplets to be infected. And right now, if you're talking about a normal office situation, open space plan with cubicles, no matter where you are on that floor plate, because of the way the mechanical systems are set up, you're now in a position just by breathing to be infected within 50 minutes. If you're talking, 5 minutes. If you're actually singing, 50 seconds. You start to see the ratios, because it's the trajectory of these droplets. And it doesn't matter if you're sitting 6 feet apart or every other table in a restaurant. It has nothing to do with the science of the data, which is why we're looking at the technology as not being the silver bullet to any of this, or even what happens with our mechanical systems. But it has to be an ecosystem approach where we have to now start to understand that people's perceptions, such as, I was in my local grocery store about 4 weeks ago, and I was in the frozen food section, mask on, the whole bit. And someone coughed really loud. And then someone else sneezed. And I swear to you, people left their baskets full of food and ran out of the grocery store. I'm going, is that the new normal? Right? Is that what we have to now start to deal with? Is the trust between people, I think, is going to be the key of how these things open up. So it's going to be a little bit of the technologies, which we're seeing things like contact tracing and other types of tools, which are interesting. But those as standalone are not the answer. What we have to also understand is the science behind this and the data behind things like our existing mechanical systems and how they are failing us because of the way that we've set them up. Everything from the way the diffusers go and create atmospheres within these boxes, these volumes that we call offices, restaurants, retail establishments, and sports arenas. The number one complaint in the world for facility managers is it's too hot or it's too cold. That's based upon the atmospheres that are created by our existing mechanical systems. What we're watching are amazing innovations that are coming fast and furious about things like putting UV inside of the air intakes so that you have a cleaner air that's at least being pumped into these spaces. Well, once they're in the space, what we're also looking at is a way of looking at diffusion, being able to stabilize the pressure based on the VAV boxes and or damper systems that you already have, so that they're not either all open or all closed, which is what most control systems do, which is a dumb way of doing things. But let's be smart about this. When you have a diffused system that actually then takes the ambient temperature and makes it so that it is not too hot or too cold, it just is what it is. It also takes the pressurization of things like droplets and limits the amount of length of where those droplets go. In most cases, no more than 20 centimeters from where you're speaking will drop 90 degrees onto a surface. We're starting to see this, but it's never going to be one answer. It's actually a holistic answer.
Okay, so we want to get back to that for sure, Paul. But I want to ask Meredith about and bring Meredith into the conversation. And thanks for being here today, both of you. Meredith, you chose the name for your new business to be Agile Work Evolutions. And so, in your own words, what is an agile workplace, and how difficult an undertaking is this? Is it realistic to think that a majority of us here are going to be on their way to helping their organization achieve that status of being called an agile workplace in the next 6 months or a year? Or are you finding this is a much longer journey for your clients?
So I'm going to ask a question first. I just got a text saying that you couldn't hear the speaker, so we want to make sure that the system's working. So that's part of being an agile workplace, is being able to respond
Sure.
quickly. So whoever texted me, text me again and let me know if you can hear me speak. So we selected the term agile workplace because we really thought that, and what we have been seeing is that the agile workplace really started about 20 years ago. And the pandemic itself has accelerated what's been going on, right? So it's really just accelerated. But what it's done is it's changed our foundation and our connection, how we connect with our companies, how we connect with our peers, how we connect with the information and data that's available to us. So the foundation has completely shifted. It's like being on quicksand right now. And I think there's a lot of companies that feel like they're on quicksand, because they're not sure how this is going to work. They have employees who say, I want to stay home because it's working better for me. I have better performance, or I'm too scared to go into the office. And that this idea of being agile, even the term, and it makes me crazy, people say we're doing return to work. We're not returning to work. For anybody that worked in an office building and was set up at home, has been working for 13 weeks. The reality is, for many of us, it's a return to the office. I mean, yes, if you're in retail or you're in manufacturing, it might be a return to work. But we even have to be careful with the words that we use. So calling something return to work when it's really just a return to a facility and work continues, then it's something that really should be considered. Now, I'm just seeing some messages saying the sound doesn't appear to be working for a number of people. I'm just going to check my watch here. No, I'm not getting, I haven't heard from anybody if the sound is working. So if we could have, Kieran, if you could just send a message out and see if they can hear us. I'm not sure that they can.
I think we'll be, there might be some comments in the chat room if that's happening. I'll just take a quick check and see if there's anything that we want to deal with at this point, Kieran. Okay, so I think it just might be an individual remote situation for a couple of people at the time being. So I think we can carry on. But thank you for keeping an eye on that for us. But Meredith, I want to come back to the fact that you've been working on many buildings and with many clients over your career, and I'm imagining you're busier now than ever. So some of the things that you were learning about how to help your clients become more agile in their work settings, are all those things that you're working on pre-COVID still applicable today, or are we all looking right now with this reality that none of us anticipated, a complete overhaul? And so what do you think we have to be focused on starting right now? The people that are on in the room today, they all want to know how we can move forward and what the right next step would be. So I want to have you carry on with that in mind.
Well, that's a good question, Jeff. So for the clients that we had worked with pre-COVID, their response to COVID was seamless. They had the policy set up, they had the technology, they knew they had the bandwidth, they had their management team and leadership team were fully trained on how to manage a distributed team. So that their transfer into what we call lockdown or work from home was effectively seamless. For those who had delayed, looking at being able to work in a different fashion, that it's just another work site as opposed to it's a benefit or it's an opportunity that because you've got a personal issue you have to resolve, that they certainly struggled. So do the best practices that were developed pre-COVID still work? Absolutely. So the ability to work in a variety of ways, how we do that. It's something as simple as on a conference call and on a video call, and we've all gotten used to Zoom. But if the person speaking says, I'm done now, that in itself is a signal to people that they can now jump in. Because we've all been on the call of, as they're trying
You're all
to
right?
fight
You're
their way
okay,
in.
Meredith? You're all right?
I'm good. I'm good. But that's exactly the kind of thing that happens. Or even the fact that people don't want to turn their video on. So one of the requirements one of the protocols that we recommend to clients is that whatever your start date, whatever your start time in the morning is, 8 a.m., 9 a.m., whatever it is, that you're dressed and you're camera ready. And because you don't get to know the person, you don't get to read the facial expression or the body language if all you have is voice and not video. So we push strongly for video. More people are getting comfortable with it, but I've heard comments from people about, but I haven't worn makeup in 3 weeks, or I need a haircut, I don't want you to see me, or whatever it happens to be. But this is still professional, and even for the leaders, the most important thing for them is that the employees understand who they are, where they're coming from. And it's hard to do that if you're not on video.
There we go. And this is the appropriate time for me to give a shout out to my son who has learned how to cut hair from YouTube, and so I've never looked like this. I don't know whether it's better or not. But
this is actually an awesome time to be hair challenged.
There we go. And there are benefits all around. You see the bright side. And speaking of that, Paul, when you work on cities, I can't imagine there's a lot of people on the call today that are working on developing plans for cities. But if we can scale what you're working on with cities and bring it down to a building or say an individual business, what are some of the things that you've learned in your creation and the most important parts of a smart city that can translate to a business or an office building?
Sure. So there's a couple of things that we needed to discover over the past 12 years when we got into beyond urban design, but actually then constructing cities and then having to manage them. One of them is that the digital equivalent of what we are procuring becomes more pronounced and important, meaning the categorization of things like data. Working with CSC and CSI back here in the US, CSC up in Canada, we've been neglecting, especially in the digital realm, the idea of the taxonomies of things. And this becomes very important for smart buildings and what that means to people. Because the data that you're capturing in things like CAD and BIM, things like that are important for the design and construction phase for that capital asset. The interesting thing is when you take that same data, instead of having to recreate it, and pivot it for facility management and operations. There's a lot of things that come out of that has never, in my opinion, I've not seen it work smoothly yet. It's still in that infancy of going, how do you pivot taxonomies? Because some things fall off that are not as important during the facility management phase that are very important during design and construction. Once you have that, the aggregation of that per block, per neighborhood, per district, then per city, become the way that you manage that city. So the authenticity is really important. The second thing we've learned is that innovation is key. But you have to understand what you're disrupting first. I love a lot of these startups that come out of left field. They're like, oh, we're going to disrupt the construction. We're going to disrupt the prop tech industry and blah, 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 but yet they've never swung a hammer or actually done an execution of a tenant lease in their lives. And yet they're disrupting things. So, the old gray hairs like me go, that's interesting, but I'm more interested in how do the innovations help? Things like, how about voice? we've been exposed now in the consumer market to things like Alexa and things like the Google opportunities of having these really intelligent speakers do things for us. Now, I was the number one person in the world that never wanted one of these things, right? But a year ago, Christmas, my wife gives me one for Christmas, right?
I was number 2.
Right, because I didn't want this thing listening to me. I do a lot of freaky things at home. I don't want them listening. So at the end of the day, I wanted to make sure that that I understood this thing. And my goodness, all of a sudden, I'm starting to see now a new type of interface with our facilities, and I think that was a huge discovery. Number one, there is no one silver bullet, just like in the world of COVID. There's no one silver bullet for how you do a city, how you do a neighborhood, how you do a building. Because when you start to look at all of the ecosystems involved, we call them the innovations ingredients. And what we create are cookbooks that create recipes that are very unique to that building, very unique to that city, that are not replicable. Some things can be reused, but the essence of the culture, of the climate, of the society at that moment in time is what you're trying to reflect. And at that point, you actually create at least the beginnings of storytelling, which I think is one of the big things that facility managers as we move forward have to get better at. In that it's not just about putting in a new, mechanical system. It's not just about, the smart lighting, which is so important to things, but it's in the context of what the story that they're trying to tell. So in the case of voice activation, now all of a sudden we have a very interesting user interface, because as it learns who you are over time, it starts to modify how it starts to work by being hooked into things like security systems, like lighting, like temperature control, so that it understands and anticipates your needs. So we're moving from a reactive type of system to an anticipatory reaction. Joe Pine, who's a wonderful author for business books, he wrote Mass Customization, The Experience Economy, things like that. I met him while working with the Walt Disney Imagineering Group, and he has a phrase for this next phase of sticking this voice activation in place. He calls it the genius platform, because it's starting to think ahead for you for safety and security and all these things that we're going to need. A case in point would be one of our projects. It's our first smart city that we designed. It's in the northern suburbs of Jeddah, called the Jeddah Economic City. Karen, I don't know if you can post up right now, at least
Yeah,
that
we
first.
have a photo I think we can share here.
So it's at its centerpiece is the world's tallest building. It's a 1 kilometer tall tower. We're about 80% complete, as you can see. It will house 30,000 people at any one time for a live, work, play, learn environment. It also has a built-in system of machine learning and artificial intelligence to learn who you are, upwards of over 50,000 different types of relationships, we call them, with people. One of the reasons why we did this is that the top area of that tower at 1 kilometer sways 4 meters. 4 meters, right? So we want to make sure that you can ask the building, are we okay? If it's a windstorm, anything like that, or do we have to be worried? Or if you're a little, concerned about, fire or height, the building can help you. And this is the types of relationships that we're looking at for, again, safety and security first, but then also an increased measurable increase of quality of life. And I think that as we start to learn how the buildings can start to have a personality, and we have a relationship with that personality that we trust, again, getting back to that word trust, I think we're entering into a very interesting new phase. And this, talks like this, when we first designed this 6 years ago, people thought we were nuts. Now, it's very interesting, especially when you're working from home, that the art of the possible is here. The art of the possible. So we are now looking at things that are every day and looking at those as being one of the components in an overall solution that we hope can be looked upon as, well, yeah, of course you do that.
But I think what's going to be interesting is who's going to be monitoring these conversations that are happening in a building, and what are they going to be doing with somehow someone's feeling about being at work that day versus not being. So that again creates that concern. We've got some questions coming in, but I'm excited to get to the next element. I think a lot of people are wondering who this Kieran is, and if Kieran is actually a robot or a real person. And so I think it's appropriate we want to get our first poll question available for everyone. And so I'm going to give Kieran a chance to do that right now.
Hey everyone, thank you very much. I know my name, it says Alan, but yes, I'm Kieran. So don't be fooled. We're going to throw up the first poll question here. So if there's any problem seeing it, just shoot me a message here, but you should be able to see it on the main screen. We're going to give about 30 seconds for you guys to look it over and to choose the answer you think is most viable to you. And then we will be reflecting on those answers and asking Paul and Meredith both for their opinions on that.
All right. And so while that time is going on, I just wanted to take a moment and thank everyone again for being here. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about what's going to be coming up as we work our way through the session today, and some surprises that we have planned. We're hoping to do a demo at the end of today's show, but we aren't quite ready for that. I'll talk about that in a second. But what we have done is I host our community radio show here in Ottawa, and we are constantly getting reminded of the artists in our community that are unable to, make a living from performing during COVID. And I've been encouraging people that if you're having a virtual company picnic this summer or an event, think about bringing a local artist into the room, sharing the space with them, and having them do a performance, and sending them a little bit of money for their expertise, for their talent. And so we have done just that. Today we've got Ottawa's own Lynn Hanson is going to be performing a special song at the end of the panel discussion today. Lynn is an amazing performer. You're going to love her lyrics, her songwriting, and her presence. And while Lynn is performing, we're going to be opening up some links to the food banks for both USA and Canada that you can go in. And because we're making this event available to you at no charge, we're hoping that you'll find it in a capacity to maybe make a donation in lieu of a fee for taking in today, and making a donation to your local food bank. We're going to make those links available later on. We're also going to be sending you a survey within about 24 hours of the event. We'd love your feedback to make these events better for the future. It's again, this is the first time that we've ventured out and to do something like this. So I'm hoping you're enjoying how things are going, and we will look forward and have more for you very, very shortly. So I think we have used up our time on the survey.
Yep.
All right.
We
want to share some results?
Yep, we're going to show the results that we got here. So as you guys can see on the screen here, we have, as the highest option chosen was returning to work with flexible hours and physical distancing. So Meredith, what's your opinion on these answers, and were you expecting to have that as the most popular choice?
I was. There have been a number of surveys done about allowing employees to continue to work from home, and we've heard about Shopify, and we've heard about Twitter, and we've heard about Facebook. But what I am hearing from most of my clients and what I'm reading is the vast majority are really looking at how do we return to work with flexible hours and physical distancing. What I don't think people understand is they're not returning to the same workplace. Most clients are shutting down all common areas, staff lounges, coffee counters, telephone booths, relaxation zones. All of those are being shut down because of the concern of some kind of virus transfer. And yesterday, I actually did a journey map of someone leaving their house, going to work, sitting at their cubicle, going to a meeting, and going home. And it was 47 steps, including numerous times of sanitizing hands. Even when you get to the office, it's going, assuming you're in an office tower, you're going to stand in line to get in the building. Then you're going to stand in line to answer COVID questions. Then you're going to stand in line to get your temperature done. Then you're going to stand in line at security to see if your manager has approved you to attend. Then you're going to stand in line at the elevator. And you can imagine with these, Ottawa, we don't have a lot of really tall buildings, but I can see in places like New York, with buildings that are 100+ stories, you could be in line for the elevator for 2 or 3 hours just because of trying to get on the elevator. So it's a very different world that we're going to. We are seeing more companies saying, you know what, we're just going to allow employees to continue to work from home. So I'm not surprised that that's second. I think that is going to continue to increase as we potentially get a second wave, or as somebody has an infection. And every time that somebody is identified positive and has been at the office, we're shutting the building down, we're going to clean it, and then we're going to bring everybody back. People are going to get sick and tired of carrying monitors home, being at home, not being at home, being back at the office, and companies are going to start to see a wear and tear on their pocketbook. Cleaning a building right now is running at about 25 to 35 cents a square foot. That's only going to increase over time. Mm-hmm. So I think there are some we can use the technology for sure. Contact tracing, being able to do things like register Bluetooth in a cell phone so that you can find out who's in the building. You can identify, there's software that shows you which routes people are walking and are they walking in the right direction. So there's a lot of things that we can do. And a lot of these analytics that we had in buildings, in the past, they were nice to have. They helped us with understanding efficiency, sustainability, cost savings, and that sort of stuff. Now it's potentially life and death. So, and I was looking at a survey this morning, and about half of the individuals said they have no idea what they're going to use in terms of technology to help inform the return to the office. So it's going to be an interesting time over the next 1 to 4 years, depending on how long it takes to get a vaccine.
Yeah. Thank you, Meredith. And Paul, do you have any comments to add alongside her?
I think that Meredith is dead on with the expectations of what this poll would be. The biggest thing here also is to fight the perceptions as opposed to the realities. The realities are, if you do not have a renovate or an upgrade, which is actually the lowest part of this poll, you are going to be running into, social distancing does not work inside. I just want everyone to understand that. That's the science of the data. It's opinion. It's not meant to be for inside. I mean, we can't even agree on if it's 6 feet or 2 meters. So remember, it's about the perception of what we're trying to do here. And the example of the elevators is like dead on. That's ridiculous. It doesn't matter. It's about the droplets. It's about the amount of time. So the more that we educate ourselves, I think, about, geeking out for a weekend and really understanding what we're up against until the vaccine comes around, I think we are going to be in that constant push and pull, especially with like some of these questions I'm reading about the efficiencies. Right. But I think when we start talking about tech, efficiency and effectiveness are the two pieces that we should be really looking at. It's not productivity, because productivity, just an example for all the architects and engineers out there, you could be working on a really cool detail that's wrong, but you've copied it now and referenced it into 16 different projects. You were very productive, but were you effective or were you efficient? So as we move in this world of smart buildings and now the culture of digital work as opposed to physical work, these collisions can be violent and horrible, or they can be actually wonderful. It's almost like two ideas that collide to then create a better idea. I think that I just want to commend Illuminaire for having this type of forum, so that we can have these discussions. Because right now, if everyone says that they understand exactly what to do, they're full of crap. We're all learning. We are really right now, looking at the cow paths and saying, well, we're going to do the best that we can do.
Yeah. I was talking with someone just yesterday, and how we all check the Weather Channel, right, to see whether we want to go out for whatever we're going to do, outdoor activity. I think we're actually going to have the possibility of something called the Weather Channel, and that is you can check in and see whether or not I actually want to go to the office today, and seeing things like the
Absolutely.
wait times at elevators and so on. So I think I might have something here, but that's just for some idle chat.
Yep.
I'm looking at the time. I want to move on to our next topic. Thanks, Kieran, for that poll. We have more coming, and I just wanted to come back to, Paul, you were talking about making mistakes in buildings, and I don't know how to put this because it came up in some of our earlier chats, but you were describing the buildings that they've been designed, for the most part lately have been sealed containers. The windows don't open, everything is airtight, where everything's controlled by central systems. The air is coming in and being managed centrally. Is that the right type of environment going forward? Should we have to think about how we're building our buildings, rethink that even?
How about just one aspect? If we can get one thing done out of this hour,
Sure.
Please, anyone that's doing a new capital asset, locate where your fresh air intakes are, because everyone, street level, in an urban environment, what could go wrong? I don't know, pollution, sucking in bad air, because, right? Unbelievable. So if we can at least
Yeah, well,
agree, whoever was the genius that thought that that was a good idea, they're right up there in Mount Rushmore of stupidity with sealing up buildings. When I went to architectural school, okay, I had this great professor, professional practice, and what he said was, everyone has to understand that all buildings leak. Your job is to make sure the moisture leaks out, not in. Right. So this idea of hermetically sealing things, again, what could go wrong? I don't know. How about a global pandemic? Right. So, I think that a little bit more of, and I'm seeing this question about like a long-term care type of environment is really where we need to be looking at this. We have to start looking at buildings as products because the product has a life cycle. And I love this idea of the circular economy approach to that, where, and I'm not an anti-sustainability greenie guy. I just hate people that put their cape on and say that like I'm LEED certified. It's like, well, what were you before? You were trying to harm the environment? Like it's a ridiculous thing. When I went to school, that was called good design. Can we get back to that and start there? Because then I think the conversations can get into what you were, going for here, Jeff, where, we have to rethink how we're procuring our new buildings so they can be leading examples and back into our existing buildings for solutions. And that's going to take some time. It also means that we have to reimagine things, such as when we design our cities, we actually collide our buildings with the transportation systems. What I mean by that is that the transportation systems are now defining the physical nature of where we locate buildings and, more importantly, how they interact. Meaning that, with the procurement of and delivery of the pop-up cities of the past 150 years, both in Canada, the United States, Australia, and New Zealand, these were pop-up cities. They didn't exist beforehand, and they were forced about 100 years ago to start to accommodate the automobile. So much so that we celebrate our automobiles, that we gave them their own houses, all the garages everywhere. I mean, wow, okay. But then when you start to take a look at how that defined even real estate values, when, your job then was to place your building in a square or a rectangle, that was called location, location. What happens when you don't need roads the way that we design them in grids anymore? Because those are one of the reasons why cities that have that grid type of system are more susceptible, not just to viruses, but to crime and all these other things that are bad for society. Why? Because you're making it too easy. At the end of the day, what we're looking at is because you have to design your roads differently for autonomous vehicles. I'm talking about public transportation autonomous vehicles. Our roads are not as wide. We don't need to have curbs. We also don't need to have turning radius because what happens is with these autonomous vehicles, they pivot. They don't need to turn. Now, all of a sudden, what does that do with the relationship of where you place your buildings? Now you can place them due to climatic needs, society needs. If it's near, a sea, like in the case of our Jeddah project, we're taking the trade winds that come on and off, and we're placing our buildings closer to each other to create an artificial lung so that we start to take passive cooling into effect. The most important piece of this, though, is how then we take a look at transportation, both for goods, products, and services, and the moving people from point A to point B. We're now looking at autonomous vehicles as being the next realm of where facility managers should really be, because we're talking about moving rooms, moving real estate. The idea now that we are actually implementing in places like Singapore and in China and in Saudi Arabia and in the UAE, and now I can actually announce down here in the United States in the meth lab called underneath Canada, right, with the craziness going on. But the city of Nashville, right? So what we're doing is reimagining what happens with healthcare. Why should we have to go to a doctor's office and sit there with other sick people waiting to get into an exam room when the exam rooms can come to you, especially inside of these autonomous vehicles? It also begs the question, what does the entrances and how do we start to enter buildings, either residential buildings or office buildings, when you have an autonomous system without parking lots? Parking lots go away. So what does that mean? You start to set up entrances almost like gates at an airport, Or, do we have cues that set up? So lots of interesting design challenges that I think we're going to be talking about for years to come, that I think is like a white canvas right now for all of us to get our hands around.
Mm-hmm. You have some pictures we might show a little bit later on about some of the autonomous
Sure.
vehicles and some of the yings and yangs of that. But Meredith, I wanted to bring the example back to your work and in terms of data and the environment. And so I recall you telling me a little bit about your work with some of your clients and how you explore the tendencies and people that may have options that could have a positive impact on the environment as opposed to the daily commute that I frankly I gotta say I've actually that's the best part of the last bit of isolation. It's I just don't like
Yeah.
driving anymore. So talk about
Yeah.
the environment and data and what you're working on. I think you
Okay.
might have an
So
image that
Kieran,
you want to bring up.
I do. So Kieran is probably going to bring up the profile. So what happened was, as many of you know, I've spent many years in the workplace strategy world, and we were preparing the space for the people. We got into change management and we were preparing the people for the space. But what I kept hearing from CEOs was this term failure to launch. And I said, okay, I don't understand. What's the failure to launch? And they said, we love the space. It's great. We love the change management you did, but we never managed to get the agile work or the mobile program off the ground. And so over the last 10 years, as we've been working with clients through this concept, one of the things that kept coming up was, how do we know should be working where and how they should be working? So what we created was software that is both an employee engagement tool, so a 5 to 7 minute survey that results with the employee being identified with one of these 4 profiles. Resident ritual being someone who typically goes to the office and is assigned or has a tendency to sit in the same desk every day. The resident rover, so they're mostly in the building, could be anywhere. Mobile maverick, the old road warriors, what we knew them as, or distributed domicile. So someone who is mostly working from home, which has essentially been most of the world for the last 12 or 13 weeks. But what this translates into, and if we can go to the next slide, Kieran, what this translates into is the triple bottom line dashboard. So it's not only what are the opportunities, how do we understand, and how do the profiles break down throughout our organization? And then the next slide, please, Kieran. But we can now understand the triple bottom line. What are the opportunities in terms of people, profit, and planet? So we can show you, based on as employees respond to this survey, how many seats could possibly be liberated. So I don't need to build a workstation for these people. We could then say how that translates both into space savings and economic savings. So what's the potential for savings in real estate? But now what's the benefit to the employee? What's the commute savings? So if you think of all of you who have not been traveling to the office, how much money have you saved every month just by not having to commute? Then the productivity impact is the time savings. I didn't have to be in the car. That translates into productivity, whether the productivity is the person's dealing with emails or Zoom calls, or they're getting their kids off and less stressed, or they're going to the gym and now they're healthier, or their basement gym. But we can start to show those savings, and then it translates again into the environmental impact. So if we don't have all those cars and different types of vehicles on the road, and we're not taking up as much space in the buildings, now we have the environmental savings. This is a massive story for an organization. And then the last one, the last slide, Kieran, is our dynamic dashboard, where now I can say, well, what's my what if? What if I grow? What if I shrink? And as we play with the top bar, how many people do I think I'm really going to let be remote? How am I going to accommodate those in the office? What's the ratio of people? All of the numbers at the bottom recalculate. So if I'm looking for $1 million of rent savings, and I can guarantee you we're going to be hearing that from every client, I can start to identify what are those options to achieve that. But what this does is this focuses on the people and the organization. Strategically, what are they trying to achieve? So rather than focus on the outside, and we have to focus obviously on the building and what we're doing, but what do they need? And when my clients say to me, oh, well, we need you to help us return to the office, my first question is, no, not how many, why? Mm-hmm. Who are you bringing and why? Because as Paul said, we don't know enough about this virus yet. The social distancing, even though we're applying it to our offices, is really only for outdoors. It doesn't work indoors. When you think of most office buildings with the air being produced on the perimeter of the building, and then it's being sucked through to the center of the building and out through everything that people are breathing coming across. So unless those technologies that Paul talked about, where the droplets fall as opposed to travel, we still don't know. So this kind of tool, these workforce analytics tool, is what helps the companies not only understand what are my options today, half my population, their preference is to stay at home, maybe I don't try and bring them back. And then as we continue to move on, how does this now create a sustainable workforce and workplace strategy in the future? We've heard Shopify said they're going to be digital by default. Facebook has said for now everyone can work at home. A number of companies, OpenText said we're going to get rid of half of our real estate. That has a dramatic impact on how we live in our cities, how we work in our cities, and how we interact with our organizations. You know, Paul, even these autonomous buses, I would have loved now to have an autonomous bus to show up with a medical support for anybody that's high risk. It would have been great for the restaurants to have not Uber Eats or somebody like that, but for the restaurants to have these moving vehicles. And I think of the old days, like the bookmobile. I'm old enough to remember bookmobiles. But that's really what we're going back to is these moving rooms. And we could have 1 to 4 years ahead of us of what's coming. The fastest developed vaccine ever took 4 years.
But I think
hopefully we'll be able to increase that.
I think what you're able to help though with Meredith is that there's so many unknowns about what we're faced with right now, and I would imagine even before COVID, when you applied this type of thinking to an organization, there was probably a large number of them just didn't even know their own organization that well to begin with. They were probably genuinely surprised with their numbers. I just want to look at the time, and I want to just move on to we have another poll question because and Kieran is just an awesome job on number 1, so I can't wait to see what poll question number 2 is. And I'm also wondering if we want to look at any questions from the audience, and let's go with the poll question though right now, Kieran.
Yep. So here is the second question that's popped up on your screen now. What will your organization be most focused on in the next 6 months? So we're going to do the same thing here, and we're going to see the type of responses we get and reflect it back on Paul first and then Meredith.
Yeah, and we want to get some feedback from as many people here as possible. And Kieran, if you could just get the word out to my team to take a look at the questions that have come in, so that we can maybe identify 2 or 3 that we can get to before we're done today, because we're coming up on our final topic. And
there's quite a few in the chat there that
a little bit too many for me to keep track of while I'm sitting in the I don't know what you call my seat. The moderator seat. Anyways, let's. I hope everyone's enjoying things, and the questions have been fantastic. And we do have that performance from Lynn Hansen coming up. I also wanted to mention that I'd truly love to show you what we're working on at Illumini after this is over at some point. So we'll be posting up a link that you can click on and request a little private demo with our virtual showroom that will show you some of the smart technology that we are working on at Illumini here as your host today. And so it's fantastic. So 2:48, let's go to topic 3. I want to bring things back to Paul. And so Paul, it's there's been just this is an awful big chunk to take on with this session. So I'm really hoping that we'll be able to schedule a follow-up at some point. But I want to go back to that whole thing of the whole thought of right now. Even today, I dropped by my own office just to see how things are coming in terms of setting up our virtual demo center that we'll have very soon. And it just felt odd going back into the building. I felt I didn't feel as safe as I wanted to. I was thinking about things even just from the point of just coming to the front door and grabbing the door handle and stepping inside, looking to see if anyone was close by. So that feeling is pretty overwhelming, and I think it's going to persist for a while. So, how is smart technology? What are some of the things that you would put on your checklist saying, okay, there are things out here that are going to help. What's your list of smart tech essentials or smart data essentials that the folks here on the call today want to get more information on, maybe reach out to you for follow-up? So I'll hand that to you now, and I'll have it
Sure.
Meredith next.
I think it comes down to, the tried and true efforts of what we've been doing since we started, a real estate development firm. Um, we've never shied away from the world of sustainability, and actually we now use things like the UN Sustainable Development Goals as part of our foundation of how we design things. We also have on staff a cultural anthropologist that gets involved with the understanding of the human-centric needs first, which and that's a very interesting exercise to go through because, again, getting back to storytelling, when you're talking about pop-up cities, that are automobile-centric instead of human-centric, that are paper-driven, not data-driven, we start to get into some issues, don't we? And I think that when you start to introduce, a data-driven environment, again, getting back to the perception of things needs to be communicated to the general public. It was the problem with sidewalk labs at the Toronto waterfront. Right from the beginning, I mean, they are a case study of how not to do real estate development. I mean, just from the first instance of when that deal was made, which I was there, I know what happened, and I understand what they were trying to do. But in my case, when I go into a foreign country and I collect data, either from IoT, the Internet of Things, sensors, things like that. For the most part, we have to have a very, very clear plan about what we're going to be doing with that data and how it's collected, who manages it, and then what we're going to be doing with it. Otherwise, when we take individual person's information and resell it without their knowledge, which is the business plan of Alphabet Google, right? That's a big machine to feed, right? And they thought, hey, create a city to grab all that stuff. And by the way, it's a foreign country. Do you know what that's called in the rest of the world? That's called espionage. What the hell were they thinking, right? So when I was part of this team and, interfacing with Michael Cohn, the city of Toronto, Mayor Tory, everything else, I had a real interesting realization that, the people at Sidewalk Labs are not bad people. They've just never done real estate development before. Which then gets back to what we're trying to do with smart technologies, right? What are those things that are going to be either perceived as, whoa, you're invading privacy? Well, then I'd throw it back at you and say, well, define privacy. Because I could find out a lot more things about you up on Facebook than going to the FBI. You're willingly giving it away for free. So as we start to move forward, what we're looking at from a smart buildings aspect, from smart technologies, is there are going to be innovations, and I know that your firm, your company is right on the leading edge of it. I really, I really support what you're trying to do out there with innovation, with Illumini, because just take the lighting itself. We're dealing with lighting right now that, with LED lights, we're able to ride internet protocol at 5G speeds. Right now, down here in the US, it's available through Verizon. Now we use it for our streetlights, and that becomes a guidance system. As well, it becomes a free way of getting onto the internet as an on ramp. So many great things come of it. So when we take a look at what are the smart technologies that we need, the first thing we need is a backbone that's better than what we have today. Because even there's people on this call right now that are having problems with, just connectivity and, the frame rates of what we look like and what we're saying. Once we achieve that, at least to the better quality of where we're at, and 5G is that promise, we can then now start to take a look at the allocations of different technologies based upon both perception. Is it going to be invasive? Can I trust my other people? Like what you were experiencing, Jeff, walking into a lobby and having that feeling. So I get back to, what we do as a business. When we build our cities from scratch, I have to make people fall in love with a piece of dirt. That's my job. That I have to perceive value there. In the case of facility managers, and even in the beautiful city of like Ottawa, with all the government buildings there, you're going to have to create that trust, right? They have to fall in love with their buildings again. That they're not places that is against you. They're there for you. And I think as we start to reimagine what that means, and we all start to learn that through repetition, continuous safety, and protocols, that this new normal that we're getting into is going to be almost like, what happened almost 20 years ago, when it was unheard of to walk into a facility to have to go through a metal detector or an X-ray machine to put your, work bags and whatnot through to X-ray. Now it's just, of course you do that. The protocols that we're going to see moving forward are going to be very interesting. We do know that it's not even smart technologies, it's just smart living, is 3-ply masks. Those will become as ubiquitous as toilet paper, paper towel, and tissues. And we know that. So what are the workplaces going to do if you forget one? Is it the thing with disposal? Because I know that in some buildings you can go up to, the Purell, hand sanitizer. There are those things, but they're few and far between. Are those now the new normals? We just don't know. So, what I'd love to see coming out of this hour are more discussions like that, so that we can have the time to dive deep.
Well, you can see the overwhelming response on our poll question is worker safety, wellness, in terms of what the focus is going to be. And Meredith, I want to turn it over to you about the fact that we've got all of these measurement tools at our disposal, knowing where we are and we can be tracked and so on. But I think that what are you seeing as some essential things to allow us to feel like we can gather the team together at some point in the near future? What's going to have to be on everyone's shopping list?
So, Jeff, that's a great question. And I think that what I heard from, just give me a second, my computer wants to restart. Not now. There we go. It's a technology issue, right? It's done this to me before. So I think that Paul hit the nail on the head, and it's about trust. How do we fall in love with our buildings again? How do we trust that it's safe to go? How do we trust that the facility manager and the building operators have done what they have done? How do we trust how our data is being used? So when you selected the title Utopia, Dystopia, and I've heard some comments about, how do we understand performance? This is where we have to be really careful, because performance, just because someone's working at home doesn't mean you know what they're doing any better than they were sitting at a desk in the office. But that we're starting to see things like keystroke monitors. So I'm monitoring how many keystrokes that you're doing a day. There's a new one that takes a picture from your camera every 10 minutes to make sure that you're sitting in front of the computer. There's one that will take a screenshot every 10 minutes. So what that does is it sends a message of distrust. And, I looked at the numbers about health and wellness is not just physical wellness, it's also mental wellness. And mental wellness comes from being able to do my job, being able to do it effectively, being able to perform. And the vast majority of people want to perform. They're not, the performance reductions we're seeing are not on purpose. It could be bad technology. It could be leaders who don't know how to manage. They haven't been trained how to be a distributed worker. It could be they have children at home. There is somebody on the call who we were talking earlier, and she said, well, there's me. There's my husband, there's my adult daughter, her adult boyfriend, and his adult son. All 5 of us trying to work at home at the same time. And I've been on calls with people who said, hold on, my husband's on a Zoom call, I'm going to another room, because I can't hear you. So there's all kinds of things happening. And this is, our work from home right now is not normal work from home, because we're in an emergency situation, right? We're in a very unusual situation. But when you start to think of what are the technologies, am I going to say, yeah, I think I'm happy that someone's collecting my Bluetooth number. So if there's a contract tracing issue, they can see where I went in the building to see if I came in contact with that person at any time. So I like that, but can it be abused? Absolutely. So there's all kinds of technology out there that will help us trust our buildings, that will help us trust our employees. But my standard line is, if you don't trust your employees, why did you hire them in the first place?
Exactly.
If your clients trust you as a company, why can't you as the leaders trust your employees? So there's all kinds of tools. So you talked about whether I go to the office. So the tools that help us answer that. So some kind of concierge service. I want to know what's, have we kept the capacities so we don't exceed capacity in the building? I want to know, has the person been approved to be there and for what hours? So when we're talking about this, about the essential workers, if my essential workers are my data center guys, and we haven't found a way yet to clean a data center without causing humidity and chemical reaction issues, I want to keep them healthy. So I don't want someone there just because they feel like being there, because they have a little bit of social interaction they want. Well, guess what? You're not having lunch with your buddy. because the staff lounge is closed. You're not sitting in my cubicle having a chat with me. So that a lot of individuals who are thinking about going back are not going back to the same environment. They're going back to something very different. But I think we have a massive opportunity ahead of us as a real estate and technology professionals, consultants, and people who specialize that in their companies, because we have a ground shift of change coming. People are going to want opening windows, right, Paul? Like we have such a huge opportunity in front of us.
But not at the ground floor. Don't open the windows on the ground floor. Okay.
There's a lot of opportunity here, and it's coming up on the 3 o'clock hour. I just want to thank everyone. Our attendance has been holding pretty well for the whole thing. So we've had a few people have had to check out, but again, we're going to be sending everyone a copy of this event recorded, and I'm not sure if it's going to be the complete data file. If we're going to send you a cloud link, Kieran is surely on top of that. I'm just happy I got my hair cut for today. That was my major objective. No, just kidding. We have a lot of questions come in, but I don't know if anybody's had some time to sort through it. I know we've put the links up for both Meredith and Paul to check in. Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, just something that Meredith said that triggered something that I want to just get in under the time that we have. And I was on a call with one of the largest AE firms in the world yesterday. And they are distributed. They are headquartered in Chicago in 2 different offices. And 2 big things came. Now that they are, they always worried about the culture between the 2 offices. One is in the downtown area, one is in the suburb. And they're always like, oh, we'll just never be able to work the same. And this is the same company, right? And what was really interesting was now they realize that they're on the same side of the fence because they're all working remotely. And there is not that downtown versus suburb type of interesting interaction. And that was the first thing that hit me. The second thing is they're exploring, because they're a creative firm, different types of virtual ways of starting to interact, especially on a collaboration way, right? Because that's how you get that interaction, and nothing's going to replace the face-to-face, that type of thing. But what we're looking at right now with the gaming technologies that are out there and the ideas of avatars and the immersiveness sometimes of this, we are looking at a brand new way of working. And it is a very, very interesting way now of starting to rethink, well, what would happen if we did go this direction? Now, this is the largest AE firm in the world. And they're saying we have to work differently, and this is our time to explore it. So I would just say to everyone on this call, now is your time to explore, because you're not going to get this chance again, because we are at that inflection point where the entire global economy shut down. Mm-hmm. It's never happened in history. So congratulations on riding through it, but now let's take advantage of it.
And we're going to be sending a survey out. We want to get some feedback. We see the potential of maybe a half-day workshop as a next step, or maybe another more of a question-driven webinar where we just throw things out. But to each of you, to Paul and Meredith equally, thank you again. I just wanted to say, if we wanted to follow any blogs or any particular places where you will keep abreast of the trends, besides yourselves being on top of things, what do you have some comments of where you think you might want to send folks to look for information on this in this area? Meredith, you first.
Websites. It's Meredith's website.
Okay, yes, of course, my website. We are posting stuff regularly, and one of the places, really from a facility management viewpoint, is the IFMA.org. They've got some great tools there. They have a pandemic manual they make available for free. They have an engaged community where you can post a question or post information, and people engage with you. So it's one of the great tools when you're really trying to get down to the meat of things. But I follow Forbes and LinkedIn and Inc. and a huge variety of different sources of information. Scientific America, The Atlantic. There are all kinds of different places that I go for information to figure out what's going on. But it's whatever triggers the innovation and creativity in you. It's one thing to learn hard facts. It's another to have someone challenge your opinions and your thoughts.
Mhm.
And that's what we need. And Paul, you were talking about the technology, and I think of my niece who on Minecraft created an entire community larger than New York City at 8 years old. She understood a CAD drawing at 3. So we
Wow.
have this entire generation of people coming into the workforce. And I think of some clients who can't even keep 2D CAD drawings up to date. And now we've got an entire generation who understand the idea of creating and imagining. So this is our opportunity to imagine, but they can imagine these communities that are all about experience.
Mhm.
And they're imagining them at a scale that we would never understand, and they understand it in 3D. This is a generation that we need to be able to tap into that. We need to create a world that they come into that is healthy, that is safe, that is sustainable. That's what we need to create.
Mhm. It's so exciting this time that we're in. I mean, we've been dealing with a lot of change through our careers, and I thought, wow, things are always changing, but now they're changing even faster, and I love the fact that everyone's getting an equal voice now. The safety of the employees is taken with great consideration and value, as opposed to, well, let's just bring them in and tell them to work. They should be just happy they got a job. I love that attitude, and
Yeah,
using
yeah,
technology to make it. Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
but Jeff, that's also very dangerous.
Hmm.
Because I think that we have to have a bottom of the pool, right?
Yeah.
Because we be the blind leading the blind, and going, yay, let's go, boom, right? And some of that needs to actually look back at the past. I think we have a lot to learn from history, and two areas that I constantly refer back to are actually two authors, both professors. One at Sarah Lawrence College in New York, called Joseph Campbell, who, when he was alive, was a big believer in the power of myth, the storytelling
Hmm.
mechanisms of the of the heroic epic journeys, and I refer back to that only because you can see repetition, you can start to see trends, and you can start to see things that are not just the story that you see up front like on LinkedIn, but then the story behind that. And I think that with that thoughtfulness, I then take a look at a more modern recently deceased professor from MIT's Media Labs, Bill Mitchell. He wrote a book called The City of Bits just about 20 years ago,
Hmm.
that to this day is so influential about how we should look at the internet and everything that is attached to that technology cloudish thing. That it is a city. There's good parts about it, there's nasty parts about it, and we have to start to take a look at not just designing the physical spaces that we're going to be what some people call the stage and the theater of business. But we have to start thinking about designing the theater of the mind and start to rethink what does that mean about our interactions with our families, with ourselves, and with and with society. And what you're seeing happen here in the United States, I think, is a huge, huge, which is we can't ignore things. We can't just shovel them underneath, but we can learn from the past so that we can at least address the here and now.
There's some people in the room that will remember this reference I'm about to make. Is that early in my career, I had the pleasure of working for someone that he said there's 3 ways to approach business. You can make things happen, you can watch things happen, or you could say, what just happened? And so, we're in a position that we can make things happen. And I think that's where we want to be. Now, in my ear, I can hear our guest, Lynn Hanson, getting tuned up, and she's going to be ready to perform very, very shortly for us. She's got an amazing song. We've all been through such a stressful period, an anxious period, that take some time, to for yourself. Take some time to rest and use music for that. And that's why we're happy at Illumini to welcome Lynn Hanson into the room. But before we can do that, we're going to have to say goodbye to someone, and I don't know who it's going to be. I think I have to introduce her. So, Meredith, Paul, thank you so much. And I'm sure that you'll have a lot more people, following you on your LinkedIn pages. I know that Kieran's put those up. Your input today has been tremendous. Your time, your passion. I've been so looking forward to sharing, what I've been hearing in our little pre-calls with everyone here. I hope everyone got the same enjoyment today.
I have one question, Jeff.
Yes, sir.
When my New York Islanders win the Stanley Cup this year, will they have an asterisk after their name?
That's a good question. Well, they have to win it first of all.
No problem. No
Okay,
problem.
but I think that maybe some of that smart tech could be applied here to some things in Ottawa. I won't say what, but I mean, we have train issues, door issues on the train, draft pick issues. It all adds up, but it's we're safe, we're healthy, we're collaborating. I do hope we'll see everyone again. And I want to make some room for Lynn Hanson, but again, Meredith and Paul, what a pleasure. Thank you so much, and hopefully we can do this
Thank you.
again.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
So,
you.
Kieran, we're going to have to do some housekeeping here
Yep.
to get Lynn Hanson on. This is
Yep.
going to be exciting. So, for those of you
Okay,
that don't
I'm
know,
going to.
go ahead.
I'm gonna move Paul and Meredith to attendees if that's okay, and so I
Oh,
can
wow,
move
they can
her
stick
over
around and
to
listen.
present. Yep.
And so Lynn Hanson is a local performer and artist that recently released an album called Just Words. It's her 7th studio album. She resides here in Ottawa. She was on the beginnings of a 61-city tour in Europe. And then after 6 performances or so, the COVID situation caused her tour to be abruptly shut down. She had to come back home. But before she left on tour, her new album was getting amazing reviews on Billboard magazine, calling her the Queen of Americana. And I was so excited that I said, we need to form a country called Americana, and we have the Queen already in place, and I was just going to be the humble, gatekeeper. And I believe that you gave me that okay as citizen number 2.
Yes, you can absolutely be citizen number 2, because right now, when you have as few people who are actually a part of the country, you pretty much are willing to get all comers. So
No, it's great to see you. You've got one of those amazing microphones from I think it's called something Labs in Seattle, I think. And the other thing we're going to do today is we'd like to do is that I don't know if you heard much of what's going on, but I mean, I'll have you sing and talk about your song shortly, but we want to help the food banks today. So we've made today's event. Illumini's covered all of the planning around this, and I said to my team, I said I really want to do something, and so I know myself I'm going to make a personal donation to the food bank here in Ottawa, and Kieran is going to be putting up the links to the food banks for both U.S. and Canada. When you go to those links, you'll be able to actually find your hometown, or maybe where the rest of your family might reside, or just pick a random town and send a donation. But we just want to encourage everyone to do some giving back if you're able to do so. But really, this next little bit is about just let's. It's been such a tough time, Lynn, and I know I love your music, and I can't wait to share it with everyone here. What have you got planned for us today?
So I'm going to play a song called "Gotta Have Rain," and I think probably everybody on this call will agree that it has been a difficult few months. And here in Ontario, we're getting ready to move into stage 2 of reopening, and all these things are, starting to be put in place. What you've been talking about for over the last hour and a bit. And the song "Gotta Have Rain" is basically without a little bit of rain, you don't get flowers. So we want it to be sunny all the time. They do need things that are challenges, but I'm always amazed at how innovative humans are, and I have the utmost confidence that regardless of whether we find a vaccine or anything else, that things will move forward and we will get back to being the way that we want to be, as opposed to the way we need to be right now. So this song is called "Gotta Have Rain."
All right, enjoy, and the platform is yours.
Moon gets so lonely when there ain't no stars. A body lives if it don't have scars. When I'm lying in darkness, I hold the night like a lover to the morning light. You can't have love or a shining noon or a summer sky all bright and blue. You get some joy, you get some pain. You wanna have flowers, you gotta have rain. You wanna have flowers, can't get a diamond without some coal. You gotta dig deep when you're digging for a soul. There's always a thorn beside a beautiful rose. It seems not the highest heights bring glorious souls. You can't help love only shining and new, or a summer sky oh bright and blue. You get some joy, you get some pain. You wanna have flowers, you gotta have rain. And you wanna have flowers, you gotta have rain. The strongest heart knows what it takes to be brave, that you can't have courage without being afraid. Sometimes to stay, well, first you gotta leave, and a leap of faith, well, first you gotta believe. You can't have love only shiny and new, or a summer sky oh bright and blue. You get some joy, you get some pain. You wanna have flowers, you gotta have rain. You can't have love only shiny and new, or a summer sky all bright and blue. You get some joy, you get some pain. You wanna have flowers, you gotta have rain. You wanna have flowers, you gotta have rain.
Lynn,
Got it
Lynn,
right.
I'd like some more, please.
Would you like another? You want a song?
We've still got 37 people here, and I'm going to make another personal donation of another $20 to the food bank. I don't know which way I want to go with this. Your repertoire is amazing. We put your link up on the show page, lynnhanson.com. Tell the folks the story about Just Words and the message behind a lot of the songs in Just Words. Because in my opinion, I just did my show this morning on CKCU-FM. I did my list of my 10 albums that have been really important to me over my life. And you're the only album on there that was released since like 2010. From the moment I opened the sleeve, put the vinyl on the turntable, every song was so special. And it's all about the importance of words and how they can be just talk about the development and take a song from that album, please.
Well, I think sometimes that we don't realize just how powerful our words can be. And the last thing I wanted to do as an artist, I didn't want to be prescriptive. I didn't want to be somebody who stood on a soapbox and told people what they should think and how they should behave. But as an artist that, works so heavily with words, I realized how important they are in terms of the way that we feel about one another, both the way that we feel about ourselves. And so there's a lot of songs on Just Words that kind of deal with that topic. And I think now more than ever, here we are distanced, and we're trying to deal with each other a lot through email, a lot through texting, and even these video calls. You no longer get the benefit of, my inflections in terms of my facial. Like you can't see into the whites of my eyes in terms of what I think. And so our words are becoming even more important. And So there's a lot of content on that album that sort of deals with different topics, but I obviously I'm using words to do it.
Yeah. Now, while you think about what song you're gonna play from Just Words, it's you also have an interesting side project that came out from you were doing a performance one night in a pub, and the Seven Deadly Spins came from that, and it was you were singing a lot of songs about you must have been frustrated or angry or.
Well, I was in a bluegrass band, and there's a lot of murder ballads in bluegrass bands.
Murder ballads.
Murder ballads, and so somebody actually dared me to do an entire album of them.
And we have Seven Deadly Spins.
Well, Seven Deadly Spins. I call them songs of reckoning.
So check that one out too. But so I know I'm putting you on the spot, but have you figured out what you want to play from?
Yeah, I'll close it out with a song called "Clean Slate," which I think is probably pretty. It's pretty relevant these days. We have a lot of voices that need to be heard, and I think that as humans, we're trying very hard at the moment to listen to one another and to set aside our differences and realize how many commonalities that we have, and that it's really necessary to work together to move forward together. So
and it's so great, Lynn, because right now we have still have 30 people in the room from U.S. and Canada and possibly even overseas. So thanks everyone for sticking around with us for some more Lynn Hanson, and then I'll say a final goodbye. But it's all again back to you, Lynn.
Thanks so much. It's called Clean Slate. Like crying on Lana's shoulders, stay quiet when I could have been bolder. I've been running scared most of the time. I hear from the spotlight, chose clouds over sunlight. It turns out the rain ain't really been a friend of mine. I'm calling on the winds of change, 'cause it's time to rewrite things and wipe the slate clean. Yeah, wipe the slate clean. Life flows when I feel restless. Feel my breath till I feel breathless. I've buried myself in a lifetime of sin. I've thrown away a precious day, seen roll the other way. Not sure when things got so out of hand. I'm calling on the winds of change, 'cause it's time to rewrite things and wipe the slate clean. Yeah, wipe the slate clean. I've thrown a fortune down the wishing well, roll my love straight to the gates of hell. Watch the tide as he try to catch a moon. I've been wrong more than I've been right. I even waited for the door all night. I kept hoping he might get here soon. I'm calling on the winds of change, 'cause it's time to rewrite things and wipe the slate clean. Yeah, I'm calling on the winds of change, 'cause it's time to rearrange things and wipe the slate clean. Yeah, wipe the slate clean.
So good. Thank you so much, Lynn. And have you got any other live streams coming up that you want to mention? Any projects that folks might like?
Well, I have a brand new song that I recorded while I was while I've been in lockdown.
That's right.
Trying to raise money to buy real recording gear, so I put that out.
Okay.
And I have a live stream coming up, I think on the 21st, Facebook live stream, and I have some other things in the works.
Yeah.
And so it's always good just to sort of keep up to date on my website and things like that.
Well, it was so great that you had some time for us today, Lynn. Thank you very much. And sunny day.
Really enjoyed the discussion too. It was nice to tune into that.
Fantastic. And Sunny Day in June is the brand new song. And if you, I just played it this morning on my show at 93.1 CKCU FM on Tuesday mornings, 8 to 9 a.m. Hey, I think I got to let everybody get back to whatever virtual and unvirtual things that are on their to-do list. Yeah, thanks again, Lynn. Excellent. And support the food bank. We'll put links up for your music, and hey, we'd love to have you back. Maybe if we do a workshop, or you can do a guitar workshop as a third room.
Love to do it, man. I'm not going anywhere.
Oh, you know what? The writing exercise that you do, it's the pattern writing. I've forgotten the word.
Haiku. They're called haikus. Yeah.
Are you still doing those?
I do, and I write poetry and I write haiku as well, and very, very good for working and getting your writing to be more concise when you're limited like that.
I mean, there's a lot of people in the room today. I don't know if we can give. I don't know if Paul is still here, but I don't know if Paul secretly kept this very quiet. Paul Doherty, but he has some keyboard skills, like significant keyboard skills, including he was on the road and on tour. So I might not let that completely out until we talk to Paul again. If he is here, I'd love to give him some microphone time back. Is he still here?
Are you giving him his?
Paul, you still here, man? Or is he gone off to renew his hockey tickets? I see you. Activate your mic, Paul. Hey, but regardless, I think a lot of people that look at this time in isolation and saying, man, I've always wanted to try something new, and there might be some people that are still here that thinking about songwriting, and so that exercise that you described is part of your toolkit, right? Of just staying fresh.
Yeah, I mean, it's like anything when it comes to playing guitar, when it comes to writing, you really have to do it. You have to spend the time doing it, and you have to be willing to, when it comes to writing, you have to be willing to, revise.
Yeah.
And so when you're trying to, whether it's writing poetry, writing songs, or anything like that, always good to read from read the greats, watch the greats, learn from the greats, and then practice yourself and just keep trying to get better all the time.
Well, I think that thank you so much for your support today. Great job, Karen. Seriously, great job. He's our marketing associate. And Karen, any last words from yourself? Anything that I've forgotten? Housekeeping?
Thank you to everybody who attended, and it was an awesome time. So look forward to the next one.
All right, Lynn, Dairy Queen on me. I'm serious.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Stay safe, and thanks so much for being here today.
See you guys.